Hi there, and welcome to another BigLipz podcast. This is episode 15 that you're watching, and as ever, my name is Sam McCauley Blair, and I am joined this week by the lovely Catherine Maurice. The two of us are sort of current and former film students. So, obviously with there being a pandemic and everything, we decided to start a podcast discussing movies. This week, we're doing things a bit differently. Usually we kind of discuss like a theme or specific movies and spend the duration of the podcast talking them over. With this one, what we're doing is I'm basically going to ask Catherine a bunch of questions, which I've also got answers of my own for, and she's just going to answer them. I've got 30 questions, so we're just going to go through them, and I have no idea what she's going to say. I imagine some very interesting things, probably a lot more interesting than the things I've got to say. But yeah, we thought we'd shake it up a little bit. The idea for this one kind of came from, we'd talked about doing a podcast on movies that we hadn't seen, but that, as you can imagine, is quite difficult to do because you haven't seen the movies, so there's not that much to talk about.
Difficult to talk about them.
Exactly. You can't really discuss that much, the acting or the filmmaking or the sound. So yeah, going in a very, very different direction from the last podcast where we deconstructed a genre. This time we're deconstructing ourselves. So cool. If you're ready, Catherine, I'll hit you with the first question. Yep. Which obviously relates to the unseen movie theme, which is, what is your greatest shame of an unseen movie?
For this one, I think there's, not to sound like a pretentious film student, but while I was a pretentious film student, I went out of my way to watch a lot of you need to see these movies. But one I haven't seen and that I'm always low-key embarrassed to tell people is the movie Blade Runner. Because I feel like
really?
it's I know.
Wow.
And I'm such a big Ridley Scott fan as well. I don't know, I just think I think as well because we definitely studied it while we were at uni. I've obviously studied it previously and I've just never watched it, and I couldn't even tell you why, to be honest. I think maybe it's been built up so much now that the pressure is too much.
That is actually...
I feel like if I don't enjoy it, I'm not a film student, or I'm not a film fan. Do you know that way?
I get that. I very much get that. That's very interesting, actually, especially because I'll be talking about Blade Runner for some of my answers for some of the later ones.
Oh yeah.
Although not in any spoilerish capacity, but it is very interesting that's your one, and that's a surprise as well. I like that answer. Yeah, I have only I've made efforts throughout the years to kind of watch things. In the same vein you have, as a film student, you're aware that you have this burden to watch these things, and people 100%. Are always saying to you, more than ever, people are saying to you, you're a film student, have you not seen these films? Okay, I'll watch them.
Yeah, and there's always that at least one person in the class that's seen every movie ever from the start of cinema. And they're talking about all these movies, and you're not just that one.
Not just seen as well, but knows in depth. They've watched it more than once, and just how do you just do laps of these movies?
Exactly. When did you get the time?
Yeah, exactly. I know. I've got a few myself. I guess the most notable ones that I kind of noted were Casablanca, which is just it's always I want to see it. Nothing's stopping me from seeing it. I'm aware that it's it's a classic movie. I just haven't. Metropolis is another one. I remember people saying that for years. You'd see Metropolis, and from we watched clips of that when we were at uni. And I do remember thinking, this movie looks really striking. There's probably a lot that I'll get from it. North by Northwest, obviously the Hitchcock film, is probably the biggest Hitchcock film I've not seen. Chinatown's an obvious one as well. That's just always regarded as one of the best written screenplays. And the one my mom always goes on about is Lawrence of Arabia, which, to be fair, I really want to see Lawrence of Arabia. I am aware that it's a commitment. I feel like with Lawrence of Arabia, more than the others, I'm actually waiting to watch that one because I feel like I need to see that either on a really big screen, or at the moment I've upgraded to ultra HD watching basically in the home. So I would
not
quite
maybe not just on a laptop screen, but it's this big.
Exactly. I'd really love like a proper like blown up amazing picture quality of Lawrence of Arabia. I feel like that would be the way to do it justice. So yeah,
Yeah,
there's mine.
100%.
So on
No,
on
those
the
were really interesting choices. Sorry, what was really funny is that I haven't seen any of those ones either. And when you were mentioning, oh no, that's a lie. I've seen Casablanca, but the other
Okay.
ones, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I need to see that. And I was like, oh, I need to see that as well. Oh, I
Well,
have read loads about that one.
we need to come back one day and find out who enjoyed what more. If you enjoyed Blade Runner, or if I enjoyed Casablanca more.
Yes, love it.
Okay, so what is on the same sort of theme? What is the most annoying? Oh my God, you haven't seen that like unseen thing that people movie.
For me, there's so many, and I think there's a lot that come from like just your personal preference, like movies that you love or movies that you watched as a child. But the one I went for was Schindler's List, because I think it's crazy that there's people out there that haven't seen it. Because I think
Fair.
it's so good. It's like beautifully shot. It's really well written. It's well acted. It's also obviously like a historical movie. Everyone knows about the war and stuff like that. But I think this one is such like a kind of not easy way in, but it's not the same as watching maybe like a documentary where it's going to be really really like taxing almost the whole way
Yeah.
through. This is like it's kind of like respectful, but still shows you like the history of the war and stuff like that. So I think it's not only a good watch; it's like a teaching watch as well.
Educational one. I can't remember.
Educational. Yeah.
I can't remember if you know this or not. I do feel like you probably do, but I only watched Schindler's List last year, and I only watched it for this
When
YouTube
we were
channel.
doing our podcast
Yeah,
for the channel, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, no, I watched that, and I'd
That's
seen
bad.
Jurassic Park before, but not since I was a kid. So it was kind of like watching that for the first time as well. So it was a really weird like double feature, although obviously an appropriate
That's
one.
so funny.
So I was I was the embodiment of all that you hate. So I'm sorry about that.
I love it. I wonder if it's just because I'm such a Spielberg fan that I'm like, everyone should see every one of Spielberg's movies.
To be fair, like Schindler's List is like it's the heavy hitting one. It's the one that like it sort of establishes his sort of range as as like as a director, and it's I feel like you watch like a lot of all the sort of Spielberg movies you think of are the ones that you sort of watch when you're a kid, but that is like it's almost like a coming of age thing, isn't it, where it's like you need to watch Schindler's List. You're
Yeah,
not really an adult until you've watched Schindler's List. You need to graduate to
exactly.
like the other echelon of like Spielberg films. um
Exactly.
I'm gonna go for like a really sort of bland, like obvious choice here, but mine would just be like Lord of the Rings, where I think more for like people of our age, because it's one of those things that came out when we were sort of the right age. It came out like a lot of people watched it when they're kids and stuff. I mean, a lot of people. There are obviously people that didn't, and you get the same thing. You get the same thing with like, obviously loads of people have that with Star Wars, where they're like, have you not seen Star Wars? I kind of get it a bit more with Star Wars, where like it's I can understand, I guess, a bit more why people don't watch it, or more, I guess, more to the point, I can understand why people watch Star Wars and don't really like care for it, because I feel like there's so much of the joy of Star Wars is you kind of do need to watch it when you're young. You do kind of need to get like indoctrinated by it.
Yeah.
I don't
Yep,
think
100%. As
I,
someone who didn't watch it while I was young,
I
100% agree.
There we go. That's the thing. It screams that to me all the time as a movie, where I'm like, I love these films, but like if I was to write an essay on why, I'd probably just sound like a kid again.
Yeah.
So I'm aware
I
that they
like the
don't.
lightsaber fights.
Exactly. So I'm aware that they don't have the strongest dialogue, even though they are quotable.
Yep.
Um, but it's almost by accident that they are. Whereas like the Lord of the Rings, it won a lot of Oscars, which is not necessarily the benchmark for quality in a film, but there is a genuine like substance to it, and I mean it kind of like defied everyone's expectations when it came out and actually made like really sort of silly subject matter really sort of serious and grounded, and people took it seriously. So I think that's the one where they're long movies, but I feel like they're a lot more accessible. You could actually show them to someone of any age and they'll go, okay, that was a really good time. So that's the one that kind of like surprises me, because I'm just, I think more than anything, I'm just like, just give it a chance. Like you're
Yeah.
probably not gonna have a bad time with it. Like I can't think of anyone that I've met that's gone, yeah, I really hated those movies about the rings.
That's true, yeah. Like I know I'm not like a massive Lord of the Rings fan, but the movies are good and they are pretty enjoyable. And especially when you watch them kind of like back to back.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty good movies. They're like a nice you know what you're getting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you get when you're
That's
watching them.
that's a very good point actually. Yeah, they immediately set themselves up as something and then they pretty much deliver on it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I guess that would be why if anyone hasn't gone near it. So anyway,
Could be, yeah.
the next question. Are there any movies that you know you'll never get round to watching?
So the movie I picked for this one was The Good, the Bad and the Ugly.
Oh really?
Yeah, partly because I've never really been into westerns. I've never had any inkling to watch them. Even like at uni when we studied like spaghetti westerns and that, I appreciate like I feel like The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. That's the one with this sort of, like the super close up of everyone's eyes, isn't it?
It is
I feel
indeed.
like that's all I need to see of that movie. And I'm happy just seeing that and being like, oh, that was cool. And then just moving on with my life.
That is, yeah, I think that is very fair actually. That's a surprising answer. I've also never seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Again,
Yeah.
that's another one that I would quite like to see in like high quality. And again, I don't know how I'm going to react to it because like I think I like the idea of westerns a lot more than I actually like westerns. I haven't seen like tons of them.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of them, but again, I think like from ones I remember watching ones when I was at uni beforehand at Glasgow, and I remember them just being insanely dull. And
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think like I think they have like absolute high points. You know, I think they have like moments of absolute brilliance, but I do think that there's a lot of stuff that goes on that is just like very samey and not that interesting. So.
Yeah.
I think that's quite fair actually, because again, like you say with westerns, and if that is like the sort of epitome of westerns, I feel that is very much like, yeah, what you expect. Yeah, for
Yeah.
mine, I've gone for a bit of a cheat. I've not really got like a specific answer, but I've kind of got like extended franchise films. So like for instance, again, like this
Mm-hmm.
year, I've just been watching like to try to watch more movies that I've never seen, and again, like just going off of like movies that people say to me all the time, oh, you've not seen that movie, and sometimes it's just a case of someone will mention a movie, and I'll be like, right, okay, well, I'm going to watch that this week or next week. So for instance, like I watched the first Rocky movie, and I do actually intend to watch more of the Rocky movies because I've heard Creed's really good. But I also watched like Lethal Weapon. I've watched like I'm trying to think what else. I've watched like Die Hard. There's like a good few where like I've watched like the entry film in those franchises. And Nightmare on Elm Street is another one actually. To go into horror. And I've just never watched any more. And I think like, with maybe the exception of a few, I'm probably just never gonna watch like the full franchise because I'm aware that they kind of just like, you know, the first one kind of does it best. And I think also with some of them, like with Lethal Weapon, it's probably like the best example actually, because I really like Shane Black as like a writer and director, and he sort of wrote and directed the first Lethal Weapon, which again is the one that, you know, sort of like launched the whole franchise. And I watched that and I was like, I was exceptionally like average. I felt I
Yep.
didn't love it anyway.
Yeah.
So
Like
I'm
I've
just
only seen the first Lethal Weapon as well, and I have no. Yeah, same with you. I've never in my life been like, I could really go finding out what happens in the other
yeah,
Lethal Weapon movies.
exactly. Like yeah, the first one was so bang average that I'm just like, I can't bring myself to watch more of them when they're probably just gonna get worse. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's my sort of cheating answer. Cool.
That's
So
such a funny answer as well, because sorry, just
no, it's fine.
especially with like movies like Fast and Furious when they're on number 9. I'm like, is there any? And the Purge movies are another one. I'm like, who's still watching these?
I
Because there
saw.
must be someone out there because they keep making them.
Well, maybe every audience that goes to see them is like it's their first Purge movie. Maybe no one's.
Maybe.
Maybe no one's. I mean, I went to see the first one and then I went to see the second, and I do remember actually digging the second one. I remember thinking like, okay, actually feels like, because the first one, it felt like such a cool concept, and it felt like they just did nothing with it. Whereas the second one, I was like, okay, like they've actually taken this. I was actually really glad that they were getting a sequel, and I was like, they took it in a much more interesting direction. So cool. And then I think the third one came out, and I was like, I'm good.
Yeah,
Um,
I've seen all I need to see.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that's very fair. Cool. So the next question is, what is one movie no one has on their list but should?
So, you're gonna laugh at this one, but I'm being serious. And my choice for this was the movie Zootropolis. What else? I think it's no joke. I think it's amazing. I've spoken countless times about it before. I feel like it's me and my bestie were talking about this, and she made such a good point where it's somehow relevant but classic at the same time. Like it's telling I feel like an important story through like, and we've spoken about this before, so I won't talk about it too much, but I think as well the whole Judy Hopps thing. If you're a child, it's important to see that you should just do whatever you want with your life and chase your dreams, and that's, do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Well said.
So yeah, that's my choice. So before I continue to rant about Zootropolis again, I'll let you go.
No, it's very fair. Top quality animation with a message at its heart. What could be
Exactly.
better?
What more can you ask for?
Exactly. I've got like, yeah, it's one of those things again where I was like, I didn't have any one specific answer, because you just you rate one down and then you're like, oh actually, and then there's this movie and there's this movie and there's this movie. One I would probably say, like, of the sort of long list that I've got, there's ones that we've like talked about in the podcast before, like Bone Tomahawk, the Raid movies, which obviously now I'd like tell everyone need to see after watching.
Yep.
There's sort of like, I guess, like sort of more popular movies, but maybe like lesser known, like Fantastic Mr. Fox and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which I think are fantastic movies. Like I watched Kiss Kiss Bang Bang earlier this year, and it like, I think the movie, like, don't think it quite sticks the landing, but it was one of the most, just like one of the best times I've just had watching a film. It's just really, really like funny, sort of like quick and entertaining. I guess like my big pick here would be the movie Kubo and Two Strings, which is like a stop motion animated movie that came out 5 years ago. I think it's by the people that did, I want to say it's the people that did Coraline. That studio, Leica, I think they're called, that produced it basically. And it's just, I remember seeing it in the cinema, and I think there was like no real buzz around it. I think my friend maybe suggested we go see it, and I absolutely like blown away by it. It has like one of the most like beautiful sort of art styles. Obviously the stop motion animation is like a total treat. I think actually in the credits they sort of like show you how they like like how they built one of the models that they use in the film, which is just like a really nice thing to sort of put in there. And yeah, it's just like a really fun, like sort of fantasy action adventure movie. It just like, I think it's got a pretty solid cast as well. I'm pretty sure that Ralph Fiennes is in it, Matthew McConaughey. But yeah, like that's one that I mean I almost forgot to mention it, but it's one as like was like an absolute gem of a movie that I just don't think it's ever talked about.
I don't know if I've even heard of it, to be
There
honest.
we go. Case in point.
There you go, innit?
I like that we both went for animation as well.
I love it.
People don't rate animation highly enough.
Exactly.
Cool. So next question. What is the closest that you've come to watching one of your unseen movies?
So my choice for this one again was my biggest shame of an unseen movie, and it was the movie Blade Runner. So basically, I had started to watch it, and I think it was the director's cut I was watching, but I knew just from different conversations that there was like 15 different cuts.
Yeah.
Where so I think there was a bit of that, like, is this the best one? Am I watching the best cut? Am I just watching the longest one? Like, there was a bit of that. I'm also not an enormous fan of Harrison Ford, so that made it quite difficult.
Which is such a surprise, because you love Star Wars so much.
I mean, I love Star Wars, such a huge fan. I do like Indiana Jones.
True.
But that's not a particularly difficult character to play.
In spite of him.
Yeah. And yeah, I feel like sci-fi is a weird one for me. I don't know whether I just tell myself that I don't enjoy it as much, or whether I just need to be in the mood for it. Because sometimes if I just accept, like, I love the movie Alien, which is like a sci-fi kind of horror. But yeah, I got like, honestly, maybe like 10-15 minutes in, and I was like, nah, I just changed it.
That's fair.
And I'm sure I will go back at some point, but I feel like, yeah, the fact that there's like 15 different cuts is stressful because I'm like, which one do you watch? Which one do you watch first? Do you watch the one with all of the added scenes in it? And then if you go back and watch it on the telly or whatever, and you feel like you're missing bits, does that spoil it? The pressure's just too much.
Well, it changes. I think it massively changes how you read the movie as well. Like, I mean, obviously you've not seen it. I'm not going to spoil it, but I think one of the reasons it's kind of so loved and so sort of talked about is the fact that there's a lot of like interpretation. But I think I guess one of the qualities or one of the detriments of like the various cuts is the fact that some of the end. I think some of the cuts basically like double down on like one thing, and then another cut will like double down on like the contradictory thing, and then some are like a bit more ambiguous. So I think that because again I think I've seen it a couple of times, but I think I've seen the same cut twice, which is annoying because I'm pretty sure the second time I went to watch it I was like, I really want to watch a different cut, and then but I didn't remember what cut I'd seen the first time, so I was like, I just need to
Amazing.
like you said, it's like 15, so I was like, there's probably a good chance I'm not going to be watching the same cut again, and it was the same cut again. So but yeah,
that's annoying.
I know
that's annoying
exactly.
because you'd have to watch the entire movie before you were like, yeah, that was the cut that I've seen.
Yeah, exactly. I know exactly. Yeah. Well, I guess one thing I would say that might encourage you to watch Blade Runner, just because it just popped into my head while you were talking about it, and yeah, is like a tidbit I picked up from a Ridley Scott interview like a few months ago. And apparently, so again, like I think it's one of the endings. I don't think it's a consistent ending, but I think there's an ending basically, where there's like a shot of like characters driving through some woods, and apparently that footage was shot by Stanley Kubrick for The Shining. Apparently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, apparently when he was Scott was like making the film, he spoke to Kubrick. I think he actually might have called Kubrick and just straight up asked him, because obviously the opening of The Shining has like all that footage of them like, you know, driving up towards the hotel, and I think Scott was very aware. He was like, well, Stanley Kubrick probably has like reels and reels and reels of like footage from that. Like, well, you will do, because you would have to, I guess, shoot like, you know, to get like the bits that he wanted, he'd probably just shoot like endless amounts of it. So I think he just rang him up and was like, yo, can I see, rather than going out and shooting this stuff, can I just take what you've got? And Stanley Kubrick was like, yeah, but like the one caveat is you obviously can't use a single like frame of footage that I used. It's like fine. So yeah,
yeah, fair.
One of the endings of Blade Runner was directed by Stanley Kubrick.
Now I'm tempted.
Exactly. But yeah, I think mine, I'm kind of similar, where I guess I haven't started. There's like a bunch of films where I've seen like clips of and stuff. I own quite a lot of films that I'm like ashamed I haven't watched. Which is quite bad, because I'm just like and I guess to copy one from Blade Runner, I started watching. I've seen it now, but like for ages, Citizen Kane was like my great shame of like a movie that I hadn't seen. Only watched it this year, but I did start watching it 2 years ago. So like I got like half an hour.
Is that you only just finishing it this year?
Basically, yeah. It took me like 2 years to finish the movie. I had to rewatch the beginning because I was like, I don't remember how it begins. So yeah, like I sort of sympathise with that, because the worst thing is I was enjoying it. Like I was enjoying the start of it. I think I had, for whatever reason, I think I had something to do again, and I just like paused it, turned it off, and I was like, I'll go back to it next time I sit down to watch something. Did not do that.
No.
So yeah, I feel your pain on that one. So to get on to the next question, which movie do you wish you hadn't seen?
My choice for this movie was it's called Excision, and it came out in 2012, and I've never heard anything about it. It was my pal at the time had suggested that we watch it, and I don't even like to think about it now, because it was the most like, I've never watched a movie and felt so like uneasy and ill and just horrible the whole way through. And I don't know whether it was because it was really, really gory, and like a horribly realistic but unnecessary way, where like, fair enough, sometimes movies are really gory, but they're horror movies or they're slasher movies, so you expect it and it's grim, but you're kind of enjoying yourself. There was none of that in this movie. It was just, I remember at the time, what age would I have been then, like 17, 18? Oh, I don't know, it just made me feel so horrible and uneasy, and I couldn't like I probably like couldn't even sleep that night because it was just so, there was like multiple points throughout the movie that I was like, wish I had never seen that, but here we are. So
Wow.
yeah. And
Very
do you
good
know what's
choice.
so funny? I'd obviously like buried it deep inside my
Yeah.
brain so that it didn't even, when I was first writing out my notes, I just skipped that question because it didn't even occur to me. And then it was later on, I was like, oh my god, yes.
Well, I mean, at least you almost purged it. So
Exactly. So thanks
that's,
for making me bring it
yeah,
back up.
you're very welcome. This is all about healing. um, I've gone a bit of a different direction with this one.
Hmm.
I don't have like I feel like I have like a good answer somewhere in my head for this. But one that kind of came to mind was, and this is not to say it's a bad movie and not to say I didn't enjoy it, because I did enjoy it. Yeah, there was like plenty in there that like I appreciated. But I think maybe Nosferatu might be mine. Where
Ooh.
and the reason I'm saying this is just because, sort of like you're saying with Blade Runner, um, which is interesting that you mentioned that, where there was so little that I kind of knew about it, and I'd just kind of seen like a couple of images and stuff over the years, and I think
Hmm.
not ever having seen it was like way more interesting than seeing it. Like it was almost just like this sort of buried relic from the past, that
Hmm.
like was just really creepy to sort of like think about, and I had no idea what sort of happened in it, and pretty sure I heard some stories about like aspects of it being lost and stuff like that, and there was like a proper element of like mysticism around it for me that I just, yeah, that I like quite liked having, and now that I've seen it, it's just, the movie's just like what it is. And I think the thing that kind of disappointed me about the movie, because again I knew so little about it, was it is, and obviously there was a reason for it being this and for it being Nosferatu, and not what it is, but the movie is just Dracula. um, and I think that
Yeah.
was like quite disappointing, because I was like, okay, I was going in hoping for like some sort of original, compelling like vampire story, and it's just Dracula again, and it obviously done really
Yeah.
well.
And it's unashamedly Dracula.
Exactly. Um, but yeah, so there's my answer. For the
No,
next
that was
one,
an interesting choice.
thank you very much. For the next one, what movie do you wish you'd seen sooner?
So I went a kind of weird route with this one. And
Yeah.
my choice for this one was the movie Annie Hall, because I watched it maybe a couple of years ago for the first time, and I did enjoy it. I thought it was funny. I like Diane Keaton. Um, but I feel like had I watched it when I was peak film student, I feel like I would just have been all over it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I feel like it's very like, I feel like the less said about Woody Allen the better. But it's
Yeah.
very like yeah, it's very, I don't know, I feel like it just kind of like panders to film students in this such a specific way where it's, you could be very pretentious and be like, oh, you don't enjoy Annie Hall, it's because you don't get it.
Yeah.
And I feel like had I watched it when I was that age, I would have just been all over it. And I think that would just have been funny to look back on now.
Fair. Fair. I get that actually. um, Good answer. For mine, I've got two answers here for this one. One is a
Hmm.
movie that I've still not seen. So one would be Fight Club, which I've never seen.
You've not seen Fight Club?
No, so the reason I've never seen Fight Club, is basically, and basically I had like, I wanted to watch it when I was like, I think like 13, and that was when I was like getting into like obviously older sort of
Hmm.
movies. That was the first time I watched like Alien and The Thing and stuff like that, and I remember really being fascinated by like Fight Club and wanting to see that, and not being allowed. And I mean, I've not seen the movie, so I still don't know if that's like a fair judgment call or not.
No,
um,
that's pretty fair.
but yeah, basically I wasn't allowed to see it, and then just pretty much just as I was like, just before I was allowed my parents were like, yeah, you can watch Fight Club. Um, I was watching, I think, Graham Norton or some talk show, I'm sure it was, and they just like discussed the events of the movie and like the like sort of spoiler and stuff in it, and I remember just being so bitter about it, where I was like, it's like if I
That's
had seen this
amazing.
movie, that would have been like fine, but I haven't, and I've not. It's not because I don't want to see it; it's because I can't watch it. So then, just out of spite, I've just like never really watched it. Like again, going back to like I owned, there's a DVD of Fight Club sitting in the house, and all year I've been like, I should probably watch Fight Club like at long last. Still haven't, because I'm like still like spiteful about that. And to make it worse, like the more time has gone on, the more like other like tidbits and like spoilers and bits of information I've picked up about the movie. So it's now even worse.
There's probably not even any need for you to see the movie.
Exactly.
You've probably heard everything that happens.
Exactly. I think I think basically the other one, which wasn't like a conscious decision. I wasn't like, oh, I need to see this movie and then had it ruined, but it was just the Shawshank Redemption, where like again, I had seen so many like parodies and spoofs and things that like pay homage to it, and I think Family Guy basically do an episode where they like go beat by beat through the story, and I didn't really think anything of it when I was watching it, but like by the time that it came to me watching the Shawshank Redemption, I think literally every single scene I was like, oh, I remember this bit. And it was just this like, I still enjoyed it, like I still had a really good time with the Shawshank Redemption. That was a really good movie, but at the same time I was like, I didn't really get much of an impact because I knew everything that was going to happen.
That's annoying as well when it's something like Family Guy that's such a parody, where like obviously in your head you've got like a funny version, so that when it happens in real life you're like, that looks weird.
That's a good point as well. Yeah, definitely undercuts a lot of the drama when I'm just like, when I'm like, this isn't.
Like the scene when like Andy's playing that lovely like classical music, but in the Family Guy one it's like that Gwen Stefani song. Every time I watch it I'm like, oh, that's funny.
It's so good. Oh dear. The one that gets me is when he's going through the pipe, and what is it in the movie, he uses like the thunderclap to hit it, and in the Family Guy one it's the Friends opening,
the Friends theme,
where they all clap and he hits the pipe, which is really like the most like one of the most like dramatic points of the movie, but there we go, alas. Moving on.
Funny.
If you could scrub a movie from your memory, which would it be?
So this one, it was pretty easy for me. It was the movie The Wanted, because I think it was the most trash movie I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm sad that I wasted any time watching it. I think, like, fair enough, you watch like kind of like trashy movies and you're like, that's a bit unrealistic, but you're getting into it, it's quite fun. This movie was just on a whole other level. And it was unwatchable, for me anyway. It was unwatchable. So yeah, that was my choice.
A very solid answer. I've gone a different direction than you, and I don't even know like if I actually would if I was given the choice to do this, but the really obvious one that comes to my brain is Requiem for a Dream, which I've only seen once. And do
you know what? I haven't seen it, and I've heard a lot of similar opinions, which I think is why I haven't seen it.
That's very fair. I mean, funnily enough, like it's one of those things that I feel like if I scrubbed it from my brain, like basically I first saw it when I was a kid. Effectively, I was like 10 or 11 years old, and it obviously it's it's a bleak movie. It had an impact. And that's the thing. I'm like it probably has contributed to who I am as a person. So I don't know if I actually would get rid of it. And I guess the thing is, like, again, as I was talking about unseen movies and like movies that you like, for people I can't believe you haven't seen that. I feel like Requiem for a Dream is one of those ones that I would have got around to watching eventually, just because like people talk about it so often, and so I think I would have been hit with that anyway. So yeah, that would probably be my pick, just because it's like the standout, the movie that I like remembering having like a fairly visceral reaction to. But again, that's kind of the point of it, so maybe that's a good thing.
No, interesting choice.
Thank you. So yeah, the next question. Have you ever forgotten that you've seen a film?
This one was hard because I couldn't think of a specific example of when this has happened, which was annoying because I know like it's happened before where you're like half an hour, 45 minutes into a movie where you're like, wait a minute, I've already seen this.
Yeah.
And I think it's so annoying because it's so jarring, and you spend the whole entire like rest of the movie being like, oh yeah, this is when blah blah blah, or oh I now remember because blah blah blah. But yeah, I couldn't think of a specific example. But
well, I think that
I feel like it's like Oh, sorry.
This is very much cements the point then, doesn't it? If you're, because I had exactly the same thing where I was like, right, there definitely
Yeah.
have been movies that like I've forgotten that I've seen, but annoyingly, you forget that you've seen them. So
Yeah.
it makes it very difficult.
I've got
to
questions to answer.
Exactly. I mean, I could kind of cheat, and so I first went to see both like A Million Ways to Die in the West, the like Seth MacFarlane comedy western, which I imagine you've seen and watch all the time, being such a fan of westerns, and
Oh yeah, love them.
another one is Marvel's Civil War, both of which the first time I saw I was like steaming, like basically like blackout drunk. So I like
Love it. In the cinema.
In the cinema, yeah.
You're crazy.
I think with A Million Ways to Die in the West, I went with a girlfriend and we had like cocktails in a can while we were like sitting there. And then I think with Civil War, I had like water bottles filled with like vodka Coke. And I remember going to pee like halfway through the movie. I remember going to pee like halfway through the movie with my friend who was equally as drunk as I was, and both of us just being like, what is going on in this movie? We do not know. And then the next day we literally went to see it again the next day because we were like, we really wanted to see that movie. We went to see it at the midnight showing as well. That's the worst thing. In IMAX.
Did you go to the same cinema? Because that'd have been like, can you imagine they'd been like, there's those drunk boys for last night.
No, but to make it worse, we did get a poster. We got like a free like poster as part of like, because it was like opening like the midnight showing and stuff, so they were giving out free posters with it. So I had a memento that had been, but just no memory.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. The shame. Cool. So the next question, have you ever pretended not to have seen something?
This again was a hard one because I feel like being like a kind of filmy kind of person, I'm always like, if I like a trashy movie, I'll defend it till the end of my days. Same with like good movies as well. So this was one, I couldn't really think of an example of this one. I imagine if I did, it would probably have been like, you know, when you're like, oh, we'll watch that together, I imagine it would have been a scenario where, oh yeah, we'll watch that together, and I've snuck off and watched it by myself, and then had to pretend that I haven't seen it, like, oh, that was really shocking.
So yeah, that's basically that. This is one of those ones, isn't it, where you either have an answer for it or you don't really. With mine, it's pretty much exactly what you say. Like my first ever date with like my first ever girlfriend, we went to see the Russell Crowe movie, Robin Hood, or the Ridley Scott movie, Robin Hood with Russell Crowe. And I'd seen it like I think a week before with a friend, and I'm pretty sure from what I remember, I mean this was a good this was like 11 years ago. From what I remember, like me and the girl had like serious issues trying to find a movie that we both wanted to see. I think I was kind of up for seeing anything, but I think she was like a bit more picky in terms of like what she wanted to see. And I don't think there was like tons out. And I think she said Robin Hood, and I think it was just like awkwardness that I was like, it wasn't like we agreed to see it and then I went to see it behind her back. I think I'd already seen it, and out of awkwardness I was like, yeah, that looks really good. And then we went to see it, and I just literally having seen it like a week before, so I knew everything that was going to happen like beat for beat. And I just had to sit there watching it, and just like by the end of it I was like, what are your thoughts? Because I know mine. I had a week to prepare mine.
Did you spend like the rest of your relationship para that your pal was going to drop and be like, oh, when we went to see Robin Hood? we went out for such a long time, we went out for like 4 years, and I cannot remember if I ever like formally owned up to having seen it, or if it just at some point started talking about just, you know, as it just obviously suddenly mentioned. Luckily it's not the sort of movie that comes up in conversation very often. That's true. That is very true.
It's quite a safe one to like lie about not having seen, because you're not really going to get like a lot of Russell Crowe conversations. And but yeah, I think either at some point I just started like acting as if it would always been like common knowledge that I'd seen it beforehand. Or I never actually owned up to it and never did that, and like to this day she still has no idea. I honestly don't know what.
So if she stumbles across this podcast, she's gonna be heartbroken. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. The whole relationship was predicated on lying.
Exactly.
all stood for nothing. Oh dear. Anyway, are there any movies you would like to give a second chance?
My one for this one is a movie that you mentioned, which is Lawrence of Arabia, because I haven't like properly sat down and watched it. I've like kind of half watched it, and it's like you were saying, it's one of those movies where it's on everyone's list, and it's from the bits that I saw, it looked very well shot. There was a lot of really cool shots. It's obviously like a really highly regarded movie, and I think actually it was my pal that was watching it, and I was just kind of like flitting in and out. So I think like you were saying, I would want to give it like just carve out some time specifically to watch it, and not just be like, well, we watched Lawrence of Arabia, just to be like, carve out a day and be like, this is what I'm doing. I'm gonna get all the lights off and sit in the dark and watch the movie. Do it that way.
That's fair. That's very fair. What you need is like a few years and with everyone in cryo sleep, and you're looking after a spaceship. That's a really like obscure Prometheus reference. Just because like that's like all I've seen of that movie is like the clips of it in Prometheus where Michael Fassbender's robot is just like obsessed with it.
Of course, yeah.
Which I really loved as like a detail, but at the same time it's so weird that there's just no payoff to it. But yeah, that's very good answer, to be fair. For mine, I've gone for like films that I've like basically, I went to that like first watched around the same sort of time actually, and just didn't really love, but kind of felt like I should have. So I went for like the sort of Scott Pilgrim versus the World was like a movie that like it was really weird that I didn't enjoy it, because I really love Edgar Wright, his movies. Not the biggest like Michael Cera fan, but at the same time like again it's like as much as he's the main character and stuff, there's so many actors in it that I really do like. Again, I love like that it's very like it pays a lot of like homage to video games and stuff, and I obviously like especially at that age, like loved video games. So like if there was every reason for me to like it, and I remember going to see it and I think I had a cold at the time. I remember not really digging it, and I was like, I wonder if this is just because like the movie just didn't connect with me, or if it's because like I was just a bit under the weather. And yeah, exactly. So I actually rewatched it last year, and it was just the exact same reaction. I was just like, I should be loving this movie, but I'm just not. So I gave it a second chance, and it didn't go too well. And the other one that I had was Goodfellas, where again like I watched that around about the same time, and I was fine. Like I enjoyed it well enough. Like I wouldn't by no means say it was a bad movie, but I just didn't have any like love for it. And again, like I watched it earlier this year, so like 10 years after I first watched it. Again thinking, right, okay, I'm gonna give it a second chance. Especially now with like that I'd like study film and stuff. I was like, surely and there was like technically there was like some obviously the big one take where he goes into the Copacabana and stuff. I was like, there's some really cool stuff in there, but overall I was just like, the movie just it just doesn't like fully click with me. So again, I've those
that's a fair choice.
Those would have been my two picks, but I have given them second chances, and it was a mistake.
Never again.
Yeah, exactly. I've learned my lesson
if
now.
I don't like a movie, that's it.
Yeah, one chance with me. Which is unfair, because there's definitely movies that I have rewatched and loved a lot more, but those were just like two examples of films where I have thought that and it's not gone that way. Anyway.
That's funny.
Next question. Are there any films that you think you just don't get?
I think this one was one that we've spoken about previously in a podcast, and it was Apocalypse Now.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's just because I think, do you know that way writing my notes for this, I kind of came to the conclusion that maybe I'm not the biggest Francis Ford Coppola fan.
Fair.
I just his movies are very particular. Like they're very well done and shot and whatnot, but I don't think they're just my cup of tea. And I think war movies are not a movie that I would maybe choose out of other genres. I do like some, like war movies, obviously Schindler's List. But this, I don't know, I feel like I was watching it and I was thinking, when I was writing my notes, I was thinking back and I can't really remember anything about it. I can't remember any specific scenes or moments or anything. I barely remember Marlon Brando being in it. I could tell you anyone's name in the movie. I just feel like I didn't. And then you like read all about it, and I think especially being like a film student or whatever, you feel like you should love it. And then I was watching it and I was like, I feel the way I would describe it is when we were watching it for the podcast, like I struggled my way through it, is how I would describe it.
I mean, I know what the problem is. Like, was it like 20 minutes into the movie, Harrison Ford walks in for a scene?
Harrison Ford.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Completely killed the movie for you.
That's it. If he'd appeared at the end, I'd have probably loved it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Just as the movie's picking up steam, then that's it, gone.
Exactly.
Very fair choice, to be fair. I actually did really dig Apocalypse Now. And not surprisingly so, I guess, because it was one that I kind of felt I would. War movies can be like really hit and miss with me, so I get where you're coming from. And I felt like that was actually one of the better ones I'd seen. I think like one of the big things for me was like the cinematography in that movie, just like blew my mind. I couldn't get over just like how constantly gorgeous the movie was. But yeah, like that is fair, because one film that I would probably mention would be The Godfather, where like again, watched it around the same time as like Goodfellas, and I just don't really like gangster films, I think. So it was another one.
Funny that we both chose Coppola movies.
Exactly.
We just don't get it, Sam. We're just not nuanced enough.
But that's the thing, they're very long, and they are very like, and they're not overindulgent, but they indulge into like the material that he goes into. So like that's the point. You know, he is like has a lot to say and a lot that he's exploring. But if they just don't like resonate with you, then you are in for a very long ride that you're not gonna like have the best seats for. So I think that's pretty fair.
No, good choice.
Thank you. Likewise. Are there any films that you feel like everybody else just doesn't get?
My choice for this one actually was Bridget Jones' Diary. And I feel like my reasoning for this one is because I feel like a lot of people write it off as just like a rom-com, just like a trashy rom-com. But I feel like to put it in the same kind of category as movies like Friends with Benefits and stuff like that is just insulting for the movie, because it's so much better. I feel like it's really funny, it's very well written, it's really well acted, which are three things that aren't common in rom-coms.
Yeah, true. Very true.
And I feel like there's a lot of like, especially like guys, not to stereotype, but I'm stereotyping. A lot of guys just won't watch it because it seems like a rom-com, whereas I feel like if you watched it, it is like it's a fun ride. It's really funny. Have you seen it? You haven't seen it, have you?
I'm sure I told you this story before. I think that first girlfriend that I was talking about, I'm pretty sure she put it on years and years ago, and I think I was really enjoying it. Like I think I was having a really good time with it.
Yeah.
And she turned it off because she was like, "You're not enjoying this." I was like, "I am." Like, put it
That's
back
amazing.
on, having a good time, and I don't think I ever got to see the end
I wonder
of it.
if just women everywhere have got it in their minds that men hate Bridget Jones.
Yeah,
and they're like, that's unjustified.
Maybe it's the fact that I was enjoying it. Maybe it scared her. She was like, "You're not supposed to get this far through it."
Maybe. But no, yeah, that was my choice.
Fair, very good pick. Again, this is one that I feel like I have a good answer for somewhere in my head. Couldn't think of it for this, to be honest, which is really really disappointing. Really did try. I mean, like I guess my like subjective choice would be whether or not it's a movie of like high art. You could it's for the scholars to decide. My pick here would be Pirates of the Caribbean 3. Which I have like an unending amount of love. Yeah, exactly. An unending amount of love for. And it's
I have never heard that sentence said in my entire life.
Well, exactly. There you go. It proves my point. People just
That's
don't
true.
get
That
it.
is true. I think in fairness, I've only seen it maybe twice. One of the times was in the cinema, and I do remember it being very long in the cinema.
Very long.
And then there was an intermission and everything, and I think that's maybe what put me off. Because I was
Harrison Ford came out and was like, "We're gonna take a break," and you're like, oh,
exactly. I saw him and I was like, "Nah."
Movie's done. Fair. Yeah. No. Again, I'm not going to go into. I'll save it for another episode, I'm sure. Into all that I love about the movie, but yeah, I like. Legit one of my favorite films ever, which is like so weird to say, because I'm aware that that's like such a niche choice. I mean, it's a really popular film franchise, but it's such a niche choice from that franchise. It's like widely regarded as...
most people are like, 100% the first one, or maybe like 100% the second one. You're
Yeah.
like, no, the third one.
Yeah,
That's where it's at.
yeah, exactly. Everyone's missing it. But yeah.
Fair.
Anyway, moving on once again. What film should you love but don't?
This is my choice for this is actually very funny, and it was The Godfather.
I was honestly thought you were going to say Pirates of the Caribbean 3 there.
I would have died laughing if that was the case, but no. The Godfather, and pretty much for the reasons that you outlined, where it's gangster movies are like when they're good, they're pretty good, but I could live without them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like when I got around to watching it, obviously there's such big hype, and they like it's another movie they like spoof all the time, and they spoofed it in the Rugrats movie.
So they did, and is it the second one?
Yeah.
They got Paris.
I think yeah, and Angelica's like the
Yeah.
cop. Yeah. So I think by the time I got around to watching it, I was like, oh, that was alright.
Yeah.
And that was
Rugrats did it better, basically.
yeah.
Fair.
But, yeah.
Again, I can't say I disagree with your choice. My answer for this one is also quite funny. So my answer for this one is Blade Runner.
Love it.
Yeah, exactly. Where like I watched it when I was like again like 13, 14. Obviously love Ridley Scott to bits. Again, love sci-fi films. It has like such a sort of visually distinct like sort of style, and again I was watching at an age where I was able to like appreciate a lot of what was going on and what was being done with it, but at the same time I hadn't seen too much. I'd seen one episode of Red Dwarf that like really heavily spoofed it, which definitely did like curtail some of my enjoyment again, but that was the thing that got me to watch it basically. But yeah, I really just didn't, it's weird, like it just didn't click with me. I didn't love it, and I again, going back to like an earlier question, really, I went and revisited it years later, thinking, okay, maybe this time like I'll appreciate it a bit more, and again, just like didn't love it. I have a lot of love for the sequel, which is I'd really recommend watching the second one. The second one's a really well done movie. So it's probably like some of the nicest cinematography I've ever seen in any film. Roger Deakins absolutely kills it. But yeah, and there's not too much Harrison Ford in the second one as well, which was a really nice
Thank
surprise.
God. Is it a bad time to bring up the fact that I'm not the biggest Ryan Gosling fan? So yeah.
Okay, I could maybe just forget it.
Yeah, I'll maybe just keep saying that I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah, exactly. Leave it as like a mystical thing.
Yeah.
Like I should have done. Moving on then. What film should you hate but don't?
My choice for this one is Jennifer's Body, because I feel like it's outwardly super trashy, but I honestly think it's amazing. I think it's so funny. I actually think it's really well written, in the way that I feel like the way that they speak to each other is the way that you speak to your pals when you're in school. When you say things that you think are cool, or you've got your little sayings and stuff like that. It didn't feel
Forced.
overly scripted in that kind of way. But I honestly think it's so much. It's such like a fun movie. Like every time I watch it, I have a good time. I like Amanda Seyfried. I think Megan Fox was a perfect choice, for that particular role as well. And yeah,
Fair.
I think it's so good.
That's interesting because I remember being aware of the movie when it came out, and I didn't see it. I didn't really have any like particular affinity for Megan Fox, and but there has been like a weird resurgence over the last year or so, where like I've seen online generally a lot of people being like, by the way, Jennifer's Body was class. So I feel like I feel like I actually really need to check it out. So like fair.
I'd be interested to know what you think of it.
I'd be interested to know what I think of it too. And it's obviously there's obviously a lot to it, but no, good pick. I've got a couple here for mine. I guess the two sort of big ones would be, this one was really weird. So and I can't even really remember the movie, and I would say I can't even really remember the film now because it's been like 6 years or so since it came out. But I remember going to see Pitch Perfect 2 in cinema. Again with like a girlfriend. And I think I'd seen half of the first one, like a few years before, and I had literally had to put it off because I was hating it so much. Like I really couldn't stand the first one. Don't know what it was about it, but like I really was not enjoying it in the slightest. Like I was having a really bad time with that movie, and I remember like being asked to go. I think it was like early into this relationship. I remember being asked to go see Pitch Perfect 2, and I was just like, okay, this is gonna be tough. This is gonna be like a genuine test here. And I remember having like a really good time with it. I remember like laughing loads, and I was like, oh my god, Pitch Perfect 2 has it going on.
That's amazing.
So
I think I've seen it, but like I couldn't really tell you anything about it. I'm afraid.
I couldn't tell you anything
so it
about
obviously
it now.
didn't resonate with me the same way.
I honestly couldn't tell you anything about it now either, but like I know that I had a really good time with it. I think I had a friend recently that made reference to me loving Pitch Perfect, and I was like, okay, like I've obviously talked about this a lot of the time. Like I'd completely forgotten that I had. My other answer for this would be a movie I actually watched last night, and I didn't think I was going to hate it, but I've been watching. Try to watch more movies. I've been watching more like Paul Thomas Anderson movies basically for the first time. So I watched There Will Be Blood a few months ago. I watched Magnolia last week and Boogie Nights, and I probably have enjoyed each one like consecutively more. But at the same time, like every time I'm just kind of like, this is like a really highly regarded filmmaker that I've heard so much praise for him. There's so much love for him around, and I just don't really love any of his movies. Like I don't really get as like a filmmaker and stuff. I just don't really get him. I don't think he doesn't tell stories that I'm like that interested in with characters that I find that like you know they're memorable in their own way, but I just don't really like love any of them. And then I watched Punch Drunk Love, and I also like really not an Adam Sandler fan. And I watched Uncut Gems last year, and I remember like there was so much hype around that, and I was like, okay, this is like supposed to be like a really good movie, and I just couldn't stand Adam Sandler in it at all, and he basically like killed the movie for me. So I was like,
I didn't make it all the way through Uncut Gems.
There you go. So I feel like I was like, okay, going into this like. Both of these names are pretty big, and I don't really have a love for either of them. And then I watched Punch Drunk Love, and I had a really, really, really good time, and I really liked Adam Sandler in it. And I was like, oh my god, where did that come from? that was not expected in the slightest. So that would be my other one.
Good job.
Two very different films. What movie has had the biggest impact on you becoming a filmmaker?
So this one for me was funny because I decided to study film not because I particularly wanted to get into film, just because I really, really loved films. And I thought it would be interesting to learn more about them, how they're made, and I always really like semiotics and like taking meaning from different movies and stuff like that. I always think that's really interesting. As opposed to maybe like I'd say that slightly has the edge over like production side of things. But this is a movie that I watched while I was already in uni, in like third year of uni. And it's the movie The Thin Blue Line, which is obviously a documentary.
Yep.
So I've spoken about this to you before. But basically this is the movie because I would ideally want to go into doing documentaries and producing, directing, whatnot. This is the movie that properly was like, oh, documentaries can be really exciting, they can be really like groundbreaking and interesting, and they don't just need to be like either nature documentaries or terrible like reenactments and stuff like that. I remember watching it, and honestly, like that was the moment instantly then I was like, this is what I want to do. Like I want to do documentaries, and from there, like that's why I went back to uni, was to learn the production side of things so that I could go out and make my own documentaries. So yeah,
good, nice.
It's funny that it was funny because it was a random module that I had chosen, like just to kind of get up like however many credits you needed. I was like, yeah, I'll do that, and here we are.
Again, I like the answer. And yeah, I guess it's funny, isn't it? Like it's yeah, you do tend not to end up on the expected path, and it tends to be like surprises that take you there. So yeah, no, good answer. Um, I don't have like again, I feel like my answers are so like non-committal here, but I don't have like a specific answer. I don't remember. You know, you hear all these stories of people going like, yeah, I watched this one movie and that was the one that made me go, yes, I want to become a filmmaker. Obviously, like big fan of Christopher Nolan movies, and I think there was like a lot. I remember being really fascinated in like the sort of technical aspects of it, the behind the scenes, all the sort of details that were like packed in. We're watching endless sort of special features and things like that on them. Stanley Kubrick movies are another big one. Like I think those are movies that I remember like first having a sort of appreciation for like the actual details that can be like put into a movie. I think I talked on the last podcast about like the sort of detail with the mirrors and stuff and The Shining, and the fact that like the what was it, the name of the previous caretaker like changes throughout the film, but the fact that like I remember in like reading trivia for the movie, people talking about the fact that it's like, okay, well these are, and with any other filmmaker this would just be a mistake, but with Stanley Kubrick it's obviously like, you know, that he's so like a perfectionist that there's no way he would let these like mistakes slip. And I remember thinking then like, that's so cool that like he has such a reputation for like detail that you can get away with actual like what would otherwise be seen as mistakes, but people know that they're details, they're intentional. I remember like really like having like a real love for that, and just like the sort of subtlety that you can do with like your sort of storytelling. And I guess like really to go far back would be, I remember watching again The Lord of the Rings, and I remember I think that was, it didn't make me want to become a filmmaker when I was like just a kid, but I do remember it did make me want to start writing things, and I think that comes from like just like the sort of like high concept fantasy of the world, but also the fact that like Bilbo Baggins has written a book, and that I think that was, I think that's maybe the first like thing I can think of where you just, that made me kind of go, okay, well I could like write, you know, because in it's not like a movie set in like present day New York or something where he's like a big successful author. He's just like a hobbit that lives in like some grass, and he's just written a book and he just walks around with it basically. And I just like that idea that he's not written it to like publish it. It's not like he's like, oh, I need to get this to my editor or whatever. He's just written it for him really. And that was just like a really nice, like, that was just like the thing that made me kind of go, okay, well I can write things down, like I don't have to do anything with them, but I can write things down. And I would say that was probably like creative genesis for me actually like writing things in future.
That's really interesting.
Thank you. What is one movie you feel you could do more justice to?
This one was difficult because obviously you don't want to be like, that movie was trash and here's how I can do it with my £0 budget. But the movie I went for is Girl on the Train, because I feel like there were so many things in that movie that I was like, why did you do that? So like, for one thing, the book is set in England, where it makes sense because like people get the train to work, people commute in Britain, it's a thing, you get the train and there's trains everywhere. Whereas in America, I've been in America a few times and I've never once in my life seen a train there. So I feel like that was one thing that was ridiculous. It didn't make sense for the story. They didn't change enough of the story for it to make sense to be in set in America. I do think Emily Blunt was perfectly cast, as she is in everything. I think though it would have been better had it been more focused on her as a character, because there's a whole thing in the book where she's like an unreliable protagonist, or narrator, sorry, so you don't really know. She has moments where she blacks out and stuff, and in the book, sorry, you're kind of experiencing that with her. And I think if they'd focused on that in the movie a lot more, it would have had that same kind of intrigue and mystery, and then it would have made the reveal even more shocking. Whereas in the movie they were like, oh look, here's X, Y, and Z actor. Where it just, it was a weird, it wasn't, and it was weird because I feel like, maybe just because I read them both at the same time, and then they came out, I think, at similar kind of times, but this and Gone Girl, and I feel like Gone Girl's an example of a book to a movie that did it right, whereas I feel like Girl on the Train just completely missed the mark.
I've not seen Girl on the Train, but I think I remember like again seeing reviews and stuff around the time, and that seemed to sort of be the consensus, was that it's going for what Gone Girl's done, but it just it's not hitting it at all. So
but it just isn't Fincher, so.
Yeah, fair, very fair. A few things are. No, good answer. Yeah, again, it is like a bit of a cheeky question, and yeah, you are aware that like obviously it's just one of those things, isn't it? I think everyone's watched things at points and gone, I could have done that a bit better, but at the same time, like when you actually sit down to actually answer that properly, you are aware that like, okay, yeah, I can say that, but like I probably couldn't. Because
I'm saying that, but I'm like, please don't approach me and ask me to do Girl on the Train.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and I kind of went the same sort of way with my answer, where like, because I thought about it for a while, and I was like, I could, if we talked about The Purge before, if there was just the one Purge movie, the first one, then I feel like I could have done a better Purge than that, but then they did sequels, so I'm not going to go near that one. But my answer ended up being, I was like, I thought about a ton of movies, and I was like, actually, do you know what, I'm just gonna double down and go, it's a movie that I had no experience in the slightest of making that type of film, so I would probably like fall apart if I made it, but then again, as the same, probably fall apart making any of these movies. I reckon I could do a better Pirates of the Caribbean 4. Really, the franchise
to follow the amazing Pirates of the Caribbean 3.
Yeah, well, exactly. It was on such a high place, and then it immediately went from the greatest of heights to the lowest of lows. And to this day, I was so excited. It took them like, what was it, like 4 years between like, and I was following with bated breath. I was following like every step of production for that movie, and it was so disappointing. Even the score for that movie is super derivative of like the first three movies. There's not really much in the way of original work. There's a little bit, but there's a lot of just like repetitive tracks. The ending of the movie obviously like pretty much like copies the ending of the other one. There's only like a few of the returning cast. Jack Sparrow doesn't really feel like Jack Sparrow. There's so many problems with it that it felt really really off. And I feel like I could, as one film that I have such a love for Pirates of the Caribbean, I could do that one better.
That's fair, because I don't think it's Keira Knightley or Orlando Bloom. Neither of them are in it, are they?
I think it's the only one they're not in, even a little bit. So yeah, but major disappointment. Anyways, what one movie would you pick to be untouchable? So no sequels or remakes, etc. Doesn't matter if they've already been done.
So this one for me is super personal choice, and that is Silence of the Lambs, because I feel like we've spoken about Hannibal Lecter and how he's like the perfect villain, and I feel like anything that goes into his background and how he committed his murders and stuff, I feel like it almost like dilutes his character. Like there's bits in Silence of the Lambs where we get enough backstory. We know that he's a doctor. When she's looking through the newspaper articles, we get backstory there. And then obviously Dr. Chilton's talking about him, so we know enough about him that we know that he's scary, we know he's a murderer, that he is a cannibal. And I feel like anything else, even if it's good, like I've seen bits of the Hannibal series, which was obviously really good, but I'm not a massive fan of like origin movies, so I'm like, I don't want to know what Hannibal Lecter was doing before he got to jail. I don't want to know. So that would be my choice.
I think that's very fair, actually. Yeah, he works so well because you know so little about him, and Silence of the Lambs does everything it needs. Tells you everything you need to know, and the movie works better because of it. Like as you say, the more you start to like explore and unravel, the more you kind of do damage to the mystery and the sort of like intrigue. I guess like this is something that probably would have been easier to answer maybe like 5-10 years ago. I feel like it's a bit harder now because we live in a time when like movie reboots, there's no law anymore in terms of like you get like Halloween, for instance, where obviously they just completely like toss the canon out the window, and just they're like, okay, well, this is going to be a direct sequel to the first one and the first one alone. So I feel like it's now kind of which is good because I think that like it allows you to watch if you want. If I wanted, I could say that there's only 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I don't recognise the other 2.
Yep. Like with Indiana Jones, like there's only 3 Indiana Jones movies.
Exactly.
Let's not lie.
Exactly. Like you don't actually have to acknowledge the movies beyond it. You don't want to. Yeah, that's if filmmakers are doing it, then there's no reason that you can't as a fan. But I think my answer for this one, again, like I don't have an amazing answer for this one, but like, and it's one that I've only seen the first one of. No, I've actually, that's a lie. I've seen one of the later ones. My answer here would be Die Hard. And I'm not a Die Hard fan. Like I'm not like, oh my god, best film ever. I watch it every Christmas. Like I have a really good time with it. Like I remember the first time I watched this at 18. I was like, I think I expected to enjoy it a lot less because I was like, I can't be that good, and I was like, oh, it's a pretty good movie. But
Yeah.
I do remember like distinctly thinking after watching the first one, I was like, that I've just felt like it would have worked a lot better. The sort of simplicity of the story, I feel like it would actually work a lot better in isolation. I think I've seen like the fourth one. I think I watched it on TV like years before. Didn't really remember any of it. Still don't really remember any of it. And again, it's not exactly regarded as a great movie. And I think the fifth one is even worse. But they just get like more over the top and obviously more sort of cartoony and actiony. And it really just like, I think they take away from the fact that the first one is supposed to be this like sort of near average guy who's like caught in this situation and sort of survives against the odds. And I think it really takes away from like the sort of the spectacle of that and the sort of like just how well that works. And I think you kind of like watching the first one, I remember thinking like, okay, the ending of this, it's earned, you know he's going to win. And the movie obviously does a good job of establishing the stakes and making you think that, making it feel really close and everything. But I just think there is something a bit false when you're like, okay, I know that in a few movies' time he's going to be like doing mental stunts in cars and things like that, and he's just like,
yeah, like jumping out of helicopters.
And it kind of did dampen the ending when I was like, yeah, it's a shame to think like what happens to this like basically immediately after, and I think that's why I've never really had any compulsion to just watch the rest of them. But yeah. So
no, good pick.
Thank you. What movie, yet untouched, would you like to see expanded on? So in like a sequel or remake or anything like that, revisited, whoever.
This is one of those ones where I feel like I've probably got an answer, but I couldn't think of any at the time, and I think that's partly because I feel like a movie, if you're making a movie, it should be able to like stand on its own and just be like its own thing. So that would, this is a weird one. I feel like I said, I'm not a fan of like origin stories, and I feel like that's such a lazy way of expanding on something. Like Disney's certainly pumping them out now.
Yeah.
And that's always annoyed me because I'm like, I just feel like it's a waste. Like, I don't want to know why these people are evil. It's just enough that they're evil. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I didn't really have an answer for this one.
Fair.
If I'm honest.
That is, it's and very well explained as to why. I very much get it. Again, it is what it is, isn't it? Where it's like almost everything has now been touched in some capacity, and I also had like a hard time. Kind of went. There's one movie that like I don't really care for like to see the continuation of either franchise, but there's one movie that was in like development for a while that I just like would have loved to have seen just because of like how mental it sounded, or just like the premise of it is just like a really like, why was this being made? They were gonna at one point do a obviously they've done the 21 and 22 Jump Street movies. They were for a while working on a crossover with Men in Black, and I was just really excited to see. Yeah, I know exactly. I was just really excited to see what that was going to look like. I don't think it was going to be high art, but I was looking forward to just like the weirdness of it.
I feel like in fairness, that would have been fun. Like Channing Tatum and Will Smith and
exactly.
Jonah Hill,
But yeah, my other pick that I remember just like when I was younger, I remember watching this movie like a bunch and just thinking like really really wanted them to do a sequel to it was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The one with like Martin Freeman and Alan Rickman, and I remember just like absolutely that's a movie actually. I remember the very very first time I ever watched that. I remember thinking I didn't enjoy that, and then like a year or so later rewatched it, and I was like, this movie is amazing. I love this so much.
That's hilarious.
And then just like watching it endlessly. It's I can recommend or not recommend it depending on
how much viewing you go for.
Alan Rickman plays a really depressed robot, so I'd say it's worth watching for that. It has a great cast and like obviously some really high like production values, but yeah, I was always gutted at the time I was forever waiting at the time for them to do a
Fair.
sequel, and it never came. And there is obviously like, you know, really good source material there, so they could have reasonably done a sequel, and it could have been like really good. So that's my disappointment. What
Fair.
what movie do you think most exists out of time? Sorry, that, like, you know, so either maybe came out a bit too early or a bit too late.
This one was another one that was super hard. And I feel like my answer's kind of a cheat, but I'm blaming you because it was such a difficult question.
Fair.
So I've kind of gone for like my choice for this one was like just in general like Hitchcock movies, and I've kind of gone for like down a weird path, and that I've chosen them because I feel like they were so like ahead of their time.
Yeah.
In such a way that now they're the things that people do to like emulate or copy them are almost like cliched, which I don't know if that really means it's out of time, but I feel like obviously movies like Vertigo would probably be a good example, as everyone kind of hated it at the time.
Yeah.
It didn't do very well.
It's also like Vertigo is also kind of like a deconstruction of Hitchcock as well, which is really weird that he gets that meta in his own film.
Yeah, that's weird too. That's pretty egotistical to do that in your own movie.
Well, you can't do it in someone else's
look
movie.
how amazing I am. That's true, yeah. But I mean, at least wait until someone else does it.
Fair. Although,
but yeah, no, that was. I think no, I think like Vertigo's a good choice for that. But yeah, I feel like when you watch his movies now, like when you watch Psycho now, we've spoken about it before, obviously, but it's still scary to this day. And then there's movies coming out now that you're like, God, that was trash. Maybe not now because we've spoken about this, but horror's having its little comeback.
True.
But yeah, that was a difficult one.
Yeah, it's one of those questions that was easy to throw at someone, was less easy to kind of to soak up and answer myself. I was interested to see what you had, and good pick. And that's I encountered the same problem you encountered with it, where you like, again, the big example I always think of, the movie that like blew my mind was 2001: A Space Odyssey. I remember just watching this and thinking, how did they make this in the 60s? Like it just felt like there's no way this movie, like the first time I watched it, I was like, there's no way this movie was made when it was made. I think Kubrick in general is you know, again, like some of the details that he like packs in and stuff, it's just, he was so ahead of his time. But then you encounter that weird loop of like, well, he's then, you know, these movies coming out at these times then had a huge impact on other movies, and then because of that are like so cemented in their time. As like a quick aside, since you mentioned it, and I just discovered this just it was just like spat at me by the YouTube algorithm. So I wanted to advise you and anyone watching this, after this podcast, type in Vertigo video game trailer, because there's there's a video game that is coming out of Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. And you need to see the trailer. Trust me.
Okay.
But to go back to my answer, another like a very different sort of answer that I could kind of go with, that I'm just kind of mentioning as a bit of a pot shot, would be Black Widow. I feel like why is it taken till 2021 for like Scarlett Johansson to get like her Black Widow movie? Like, her character was introduced in 2010, and I remember literally like at the time reading about how, like, you know, surely she was going to get her own film, and it's just insane that it's taken until after her character was like written out, that like
that's a good point, because there's what, 3 Iron Man movies? There's like what, 2 or 3 Captain America movies, Thor. Yeah, they're all had it. Even though there's like 2 terrible Hulk movies.
Exactly, like that's it. Like they've done so many films. They've done Ant-Man movies, but yeah, like one of the leading Avengers, who's like a really big name actress, who like also is like a, you know, good action star and stuff like that. And yeah, it's mental that it's taken this long for like Black Widow to get her own film.
That's such a good point.
Are there any movies you're scared to view again for fear of ruining?
My choice for this one is Casablanca. Because I have seen it twice, And similar to your Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy, the first time I watched it, I really didn't like it. And I think I was maybe just too young, and I was kind of watching it and I was like, God, this is trash.
Yeah.
And then I watched it again, maybe when I was older, like late teens, early 20s maybe. And I loved it. So I'm so para that I could flip either way. That I could go back and I could be like, God, I
Yeah.
was right, this is trash. Or I could be like, oh, do you know what, that movie's amazing. I don't know whether at the time I watched it, whether I was just like feeling it, whether I was feeling particularly pretentious at the time. It's difficult to tell. And I like having the memory in my head where I enjoy it, and I do think it's good. So that's, yeah. And
That's
it's
fair.
annoying because I do want to watch it again because it's been so long. But I'm like, I daren't risk it.
I didn't risk it. That is fair. I love your use of the word trash as well. Like, oh, there's just no artistry to that film whatsoever. Who
Yeah,
made
like
this
what
piece of
even is this?
Did they even try with this one?
Exactly. It's not even in colour.
Yeah, no, what is there a budget? What's going on here? Oh dear. No, fair. That's a really good answer actually. I again, like it's one that I feel like there are answers for this one. One that like took a bit of searching in my brain to sort of pull up. Was there's a movie that I watched. I don't know if it was even like a proper like cinematic release. I had like a tape of it, a recorded tape. That my mum obviously just like she recorded a bunch of movies that played on TV when I was a kid, and me and my best friend used to watch them. And there was this like adaptation of Jack and the Beanstalk, and I remember it just being like the most interesting, like the coolest thing. And it was basically it was like there was like a whole, from what I remember of it, there was like a whole mythos to it. It was like set in the present day, and there was like a whole lineage thing that stretched back to like the original Jack and the Beanstalk. The original Jack and the Beanstalk story, and I think there was like a whole like thing that went on with like the two worlds, and the way that they interacted with each other, and like the sort of way that time passed between them, and like there was a whole then Jack stealing those, like I think it basically like I'm pretty sure it sort of deconstructed the Jack and the Beanstalk thing, and it turned out that he was actually more of a villain than like a good person. Don't really remember it, but I just remember it being like so cool and so interesting, and just like absolutely loving it. And I feel like if I watched, because it might just be like a made for TV movie, and I feel like if I put it on, I'm gonna be like, oh my god, this sucks. Like,
Yeah.
what is this film? So I've kind of like always like I've always been tempted to like look it up and like actually try and do the research and find out what this is and like who made it and like anything like that. But I also kind of don't ever want to. I kind of like, again, the mysticism of it just being this. I feel like my like memories of it and my impressions of it are way more interesting than like me rewatching it's gonna be.
Yeah, no, fair. That's a good point. I can't say I've heard of it or seen it, so.
Oh, there you go. But you know Jack and the Beanstalk, right?
Yeah. Heard of it.
Are there any movies that you've ruined by rewatching?
I think for this one, I think ruined is a strong word, but I think again, a movie that we've already talked about. My choice was Fight Club, and it's, I think, partly because of the time when I watched Fight Club. It was a very particular age, and everyone at school had kind of seen it, and it was very much like 13. Of its time. Yeah, no, my mum let me watch it, so. No, it was, I'd say like 15, 16 kind of, and it was very much of its time. And I think watching it now, kind of like as an adult, it just, I feel like it's still a good film, but I feel like I've seen a lot better films. I've seen a lot better Fincher films. I think it just feels a bit dated when you watch it now, and I do think it ruins it because, yeah, it just feels dated, and it feels like it's almost like low-key embarrassing that you liked it as much as you did.
Yeah. Because
you're like, oh, I thought it was so much cooler than it actually is.
Yeah, I get that. I very much get that. And I kind of had that. Well, guess to sort of circle back a little bit to the last question as well, I had that fear when I rewatched Inception, which is obviously my favourite film this year, and it's the first time I rewatched it in legit like maybe like 5-6 years, I think. And I had like a total fear rewatching it, where I was like, oh, what if like I really don't like this movie anymore? Like what, or you know, I was like, I'm probably gonna like it, but like what if it's like you say. So I remember being so obsessed with it when it came out, and I was kind of like, is this going to be the sort of thing that I now cringe at, where I was like, oh, it's not as like as good as it was, like, and it's one of those things. I think you do have like obsessions over movies at points, and you do get to points when like you look back and you're like, that's maybe this movie isn't as great as I thought it was. But thankfully I loved it to bits. So I didn't have that reaction. I've gone in a slightly different direction with this one. And I'm gonna say The Grinch. And it's not like I'm pretty sure I rewatched that movie again. Like it's probably a long time ago now, the last time I saw it, and I actually had a really good time with it. But like I'd never sit there and I'm like, oh, I need to watch The Grinch. I mean, like I'm never like, oh, I really like. After it's been so long since I've seen The Grinch, like, and I like make no mistake, I absolutely loved this movie. When I was younger, the issue is, so did my brother. And a lot more than I did. So there was a very long stretch of time when all we watched was The Grinch, and all my brother did was quote The Grinch. And I'm pretty sure
because it's a Christmas movie, so you need to the space when you can watch it's very condensed. So you just need to watch it a lot during the December month.
Don't think it was just during December we watched together. I think it was.
That's fair. I don't think I could hack The Grinch in like July.
So I honestly don't even remember when it was. I'm pretty sure school was on. I don't remember it being particularly cold, but yeah, I just remember like officially like burning out on The Grinch, and I've just never like that's never reset. I've never gone back to like wanting to watch it, because I always feel like I've seen that movie too many times.
Fair. That's very fair.
Has anyone ever broken a film for you with a single line?
I think I was kind of imagining like I was taken from this. You meant like a movie where someone had maybe like pointed out a plot hole or something like that. Which in that case, I don't have any specific memories of this. I think partly because it really annoys me when people get really like nitpicky about movies when they don't just like enjoy them as a movie. Like when people are like, oh, that woman on a desert island is clean shaven. I'm like, it's a movie. Like we don't want to like, yeah, they've also got makeup on. Like we want them to be attractive or whatever. So yeah, their hair's a bit dead and they've got their mascara on, even though they've been on the island for 10 years. So stuff like that always kind of bugs me. So I think a lot of the time I try my hardest to just kind of like get into the movie and just accept it for what it is. So the one that always really annoys me is when people are like, how could, like, there's a bit in Mulan when the Shang has like grabbed Mulan by kind of like the front of her uniform and it's like pulled all the way out, and people are like, oh, if you just looked down it would be fixed. I'm like, it's a movie, it's a cartoon movie, like just get over it. So yeah, that was another hard one where I just couldn't think of a specific example for that.
I think you're right, to be honest, because I struggled as well, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, where I think there probably was a period of time where I think this would have been a problem, where I probably like I remember like seeing Jurassic World, and I remember people being like, it's mental that she runs away from like T-Rex in heels, and I was like, I didn't even notice that she was wearing heels, but I've never rewatched the film since, but I was like, I remember thinking at the time.
Well, that's so funny actually, because it was on the telly the other day, and I do remember pointing out like, no way she's running that well in a pair of heels.
That one is I would say like pretty ludicrous, to be fair. Just because it's like such an obvious, like you couldn't do that. Like the makeup thing I feel like is quite easy to kind of get over, because you can kind of switch off from noticing it as much. I would say like a weird sort of, you do get obviously like people very obviously in makeup waking up in bed, which I always think is like a funny one. But
I love that. That's why there's like a really funny scene in Bridesmaids, when she wakes up in bed and she gets up and she puts on her makeup and then she's like, oh, this is how I wake up. It was so funny.
But yeah, like I think I struggled for the same reason as you, basically, where It's something that I probably would have cared a bit more in the past. I think you do get to a point, especially as like someone like when you start like studying film more, I mean also when you start kind of like making your own films, where you start to think like, you know, actually, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like there are all these like everything sort of has plot holes. Everything has like its issues. Nothing is like there's always like a hole you can poke somewhere. But at the end of the day, if like something's good enough, you don't really notice. But that being said, so I went like a very different way with this in the end. And it actually ties back to something we were talking about earlier, where the Blue Harvest Family Guy spoof has like kind of ruined Star Wars for me. In that like I just yeah, like there's so many moments in it, and again it's like I've watched the Family Guy ones like a bunch of times, and just found them hilarious. And I remember like watching them a bunch when they're first released, and then like watching the Star Wars movies, and then just realizing my mistake, because now there's so many scenes in that movie that I can't not hear, like I just wait for the joke, instead of like accepting the delivery. It's a bit like when the escape pod crashes in the desert, and then the stormtroopers are like checking it out, and then in the movie the scene sort of ends with like one of the stormtroopers just picking up this ring, there's like metal ring, and going, "Look sir, droids." And then in the Family Guy one pops up behind him and goes, "Look, a penny." And I cannot watch that scene without waiting for like the second stormtrooper. So it's completely like crippled my like viewing experience of that movie, because I can't just not wait for the jokes. So yeah, Family Guy ruined Star Wars for me.
That's funny. That's a good one. I've kind of got that relationship with The Shining in that Simpsons episode.
The Simpsons, yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Luckily, I haven't watched that in so long, to be fair, but I think the first time I watched The Shining, so I kind of couldn't take it seriously for that reason.
Yep.
Right. What is the most annoying film spoiler you've ever heard?
So, again, I didn't realise I was talking about this one specific movie so much, but Fight Club. I won't tell you the spoiler, since I know you've already heard it, but it's obviously a sore subject. But no joke, I remember at school, obviously before I had seen it, and this girl, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not going to watch it," and then told the entire plot of the movie. And do you know what I mean? Before I even had time to react, to be like, "No, I am," she'd already told everything. And it was like you, where by the time I did watch it, I was like, yeah, knew that was coming, or yeah, saw that coming. It definitely like ruined the movie for me.
Well, my answer for this was also Fight Club. But obviously, as we have discussed, I went down the other path and just never watched the movie.
Do you know that when you were talking about that, I was like, maybe I should have done that.
I know. So this is now very interesting. It's like the podcast sits as like, which road do you take, traveller? Yeah, one or two destinations. I love that it's happened to both of us around the same age as well. See, do you know what?
Yeah.
What age were you when it was spoiled? I bet you were older than 13.
I definitely was. I'd say maybe probably like 14, 15.
Right. Okay. Well, that's the confirmed optimal age to watch Fight Club is 13.
Yes, before people can spoil it for you.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the only fair way to do it. What is the worst spoiler that you've ever dropped yourself?
I think this one, I'm always super, super careful about spoilers, to the point where, like, if I want to talk about a movie, I'll confirm several times, have you seen it? Have you seen the movie? Have you seen the bit where... So I do that, but I was chatting to my bestie about it, and she pointed out that before she watched Inside Out, I had told her, oh, there's this one bit that's really, really sad, like it's so heartbreaking. I won't tell you what happens, but it's really sad. And she said it ruined the movie for her, because she was waiting the whole time to be like, oh, that was sad, but was that the saddest bit? So she couldn't properly get into it, because she was sitting waiting the whole time, like, trying to judge, was that sad enough to warrant it to be the saddest bit of the movie?
I know, yeah. I that's like it's like when I remember reading reviews and stuff for like comedies, or like even just like movies that have like sort of like comedic beats and whatnot in them, just like before having seen them, which is now why like I only really read reviews for why I read reviews for things after I've seen them instead of before, because I still like reading them, but it just like the reviews. I remember reading reviews where it was like, oh, and this character gets the biggest laugh of the movie. You'll know when you hear it, and every single time you read something like that, it's that same reaction where you're just like sitting there the whole time, and every time they say something, you're like, was that it? Was that like the funny? Is there a funnier bit? Like maybe I just didn't like, and it just ends up haunting you for the whole film, and it is just like, it's because it's like 100%. A non-spoiler, but at the same time it's like a huge spoiler. So good answer. And I like for mine for this one, again, I'm the same as you. Like I'm like super, because again I had like with Fight Club and stuff, like there's obviously like a list of movies that like were sort of spoiled for me, and obviously there's a bunch of movies that I've seen where like things haven't even been intentionally spoiled, but people have hinted at things, and then that's just like destroyed my like enjoyment of it. So I like always try and be like, as like, I will have like I will lie to people if I have to about like things that are going to happen in a movie, so that they are intentionally, they will believe what they kind of need to believe for like the spoiler, that for the like the movies like things to land. But I do remember, I can't remember anything I specifically said, but I do remember there was like one fight that my brother and I had when we were younger, and we just like instead of like attacking each other with violence, we attacked each other with like spoilers for things that we'd each seen and the other hadn't. I cannot remember anything,
like words cut deeper than swords, that kind of thing.
Well, we both realised that it annoyed the hell out of us to have like these things ruined, and we were kind of watching the same sort of things but at like different speeds, and there was like some things that some of us had seen that it was probably mostly TV shows than movies. But yeah, I just remember like having this really weird like spoiler off with my brother, and it just, by the end of it, like we were both just like, we've just like done so much damage to each other, you know. Like
that's
no
amazing.
one
I can't
really
even
came
imagine.
up on top.
I feel like that would be very traumatic. Like you would almost be exhausted afterwards.
What is it really? Yeah, you'd really just feel like emotionally drained. Probably the nerdiest fight you've ever heard of, but there you go. Moving on. What is the worst way you've ever watched a film?
I think this one for me was pretty obvious, and it's when you watch a movie on a plane.
Yes.
Because unless you're flying like first class, you're pretty much crammed in a seat. The screen is about here, away from your face. It's also this size.
Yep.
And you've got your your free headset, and then the noise of the plane is deafening at all times. So even when you're watching your movie, you can just hear that noise. It's just... Sorry. No, and then there's the whole thing where, like, if you're God forbid you're on the aisle and someone needs to go to pee, you need to pause it, you need to like scramble out of your seat. And then people like walk up and down the aisles, you're constantly getting like jutted on the elbow, and it's just, it's not a very nice experience. And I think what's maybe worse than when the screen is like here because the seat's so close to you. I was on a plane once, and they only had screens like up in the aisles, so the screen was like a mile away from me, and it was the same size, and I was like, "What is that on the telly?" And I had to like lean over the person beside me to be like. So watching movies on a plane is a very good way to pass the time, but it's not a very good way to watch a movie.
I think that's it, and I think I always forget this until I'm on a plane, and then like I go to watch something, I'm always like rifling through the movie collection, and I see a bunch of stuff, and I'm like, oh, it's gonna be great, like I can watch these films, and then like I always, because there's always like movies that I've not seen, I'm like, perfect, to get to watch these films. But like you said, I remember them.
Sometimes they've got great movies on there.
Yeah, films that like I'm really keen to see, and I'm like, it's a perfect way to pass the time, like you say. But every single time I then put them on, I'm just like, I forget how hard it is to enjoy something on a plane, because like you say, like all those like external factors, and the sound is so bad. And I always find that, I don't know if it's just bad luck, but like a lot of these movies don't have subtitles as well that you can put on, so it's like you can't really hear what's being said, and there's no way for you to like compensate for that. So very, very good answer there. For mine, I mean, one of my answers here you kind of already heard with A Million Ways to Die in the West and Civil War, with me just being like blackout drunk, so not an ideal way to see a film. But another one, and this isn't a movie, but it does sort of like bear talking about, just because like it's such a bad way to watch like this specific thing in particular. But I don't know. Have you ever seen Breaking Bad?
I'm kind of halfway through it.
Fair enough, right? Well, it's. I'm not going to spoil anything about it, but I watched. So
Okay,
I
thank you.
caught up with that show basically just as like the last few episodes were airing. I think they were like dropped on Netflix at the time, and I had uni like first thing in the morning. I just started like literally just started first year. I had uni first thing in the morning. It was like my first week, and the last episode of Breaking Bad came out. And I remember waking up early so that I could watch it before like going to class, just because I knew I'd been
Wow.
out of freshers. Well, I'd been out of freshers the week before, and I think I had seen an episode that had like that had released that day, but I remember just like everyone talking about it, and I remember thinking I was like, oh my god, thank God I watched this before coming out because otherwise I would have just had this whole episode ruined. And so as a
Yeah.
result, I was like, right, this is the last episode. Like, I need to see this before I go to class because I can't risk like it being spoiled. For some reason, like it wasn't coming up on Netflix before, like basically in the hour that I had to watch it, and I was like starting to freak out. I was like, this is a nightmare. Like, I don't want to get to class, and like I don't want to like have to go about uni for the day and then have people talking about it and I've not been able to watch it. It managed, so it basically came up on Netflix, but I didn't have enough time to watch the full thing before obviously leaving for uni. Thankfully, I had like a 45-minute bus journey to class.
Love
And
it.
what I did have was like a tiny like iPhone. And I remember literally watching Netflix on my phone. And to make it worse, I didn't even get to finish the episode. I think there was issues with like the internet or something, or it might have just been like the episode was longer, 45 minutes, whatever it was. I didn't even get to finish the episode, so I had to watch the last episode broken up by the day. And obviously, the whole day I was still living in
Oh,
fear that I was going to have it ruined for me. But I had to watch it on like this tiny, tiny mobile phone screen. So yeah, that was. I do remember thinking that this is not the
that
way
does
to be
sound
enjoying
grim.
like the finale of this show.
Yeah, especially
Um,
not like a series finale, not just a season finale.
exactly, yeah, exactly. Something really. And there's a lot of like beautiful cinematography in there as well. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
not the best way to view it all. Let's see. Have you ever rewatched something and found that you'd imagined part of the film?
This is I can't decide whether I imagined it or whether I've just seen it and no one else on the planet has seen it. But it was the movie Bridesmaids. And I remember this bit. I don't. So this is the thing. I don't know whether I'm maybe just getting it mixed up with another movie that Kristen Wiig's been in or something. But I'm pretty sure I remember her. She was going on. Her character Annie was going on this date, and the guy had a child, and he was away in a different room or somewhere. And the child had found in her bag like her birth control pills, and they were in like this weird circle thing. And the little girl thought they were sweeties, and then they had a whole argument about why she couldn't give her the sweeties kind of thing. And I've never seen it again. I've never even seen it in like special features. I've never heard anyone alluding to it. I've never even seen like an extended cut of Bridesmaids. So I can't be sure whether I made it up, whether it does exist, whether I'm the only person who's seen it, whether it was actually a different movie, whether it was an outtake. Who knows?
Wow, I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, I've seen Bridesmaids a few times and I have no memory of that scene. So I hate to continue the conspiracy, Catherine, but it doesn't
Well,
exist.
I was chatting to my pal about it as well, and I was like, "Do you remember that?" And she was like, "No." So
That is
who knows
interesting.
what's happening?
Uh, Fair, fair. My answer is like way less exciting. I just remember like when I was a kid, it was like the Digimon movie. It was like some like animated movie that I went to the cinema to see, and I remember just having this like vivid memory of like an action scene in it, and then I remember like seeing it on like VHS, and it just wasn't there, and just that really like really like spooked me for a while. So it's like, how did I like? I think I like just so clearly remembered that scene, and remember I think I remembered like what I was doing in the cinema at the time of that scene, that it really like freaked me out that it just wasn't there. So that
That's
like a
creepy.
very like small answer, but it just yeah, it again always kind of stuck with me. Um, what is your ultimate comfort watch?
My choice for this one is Princess Diaries, and it's a movie that I watched literally every single day when I was young. I would go home from school and I would put it on and I would watch it. I just think it's such an easy watch. It's so like fun and funny. Anne Hathaway's great in it. It's got Julie Andrews in it. What more could you ask for? Honestly, like I think even now, if it was on, I could probably tell you word for word. I actually haven't seen it in maybe like a year or so, so it's probably coming around to about the time when I need to watch it. Fair. And what I think is really funny is that, you know how people have like their dream car and stuff like that. My dream car is Mia's car in that movie. I think it's like, I've always thought it was like the coolest thing ever. I would have killed to live in her house in that big like fire, like refurb fire station. That was always so cool. But fair. Yeah, that's a movie. I could put that on if I was like sad or happy or just chilling. It's just amazing.
Great pick.
What can I say?
Great pick.
Thank you.
I love it. My sort of two main picks are going to be very obvious ones. Of like Lord of the Rings is one. Which I never actually like watched Lord of the Rings. It's always like I always have it nearby, and I'm always like, oh, I should probably put in Lord of the Rings soon. I think the last time I watched Lord of the Rings, last time I watched any of them was in class with you. And I had a great time doing it. But it's
didn't want to watch it. I wanted to watch Gladiator.
Exactly. But I think for me, like the thought of watching Lord of the Rings is just like, it's like watching a hug basically. I remember I think put on a bit of it at like Christmas time when I was really hungover and then like fell asleep during it, and that's the sort of thing. It's like I know the movie so well that that's fine. Another one is obviously Pirates of the Caribbean, where like I could again like any
Pirates of the Caribbean or Pirates of the Caribbean 3?
Just the first three.
Just the first three.
I could watch forever and I'm just always going to be happy when those movies are on. But yeah, the less said about
good choices.
What follows, the better. Which, to go in a very different direction, which movie made you cry the hardest?
This one was funny because there was a lot of movies that kind of like sprung to mind instantly, like movies like Titanic. Obviously, another one was The Impossible, but the movie I went for was Coco. I think
wow,
because it was so unexpected, and it's a shame. I do feel bad for the movie because I wasn't expecting a lot going in, and I don't know why. I just remember seeing a lot of like press for it before it came out, and I was like, I really don't want to watch that. But funnily enough, watched it on the plane. And that did not hinder the sadness of this movie. Have you seen it? Yeah.
So funnily enough, I was going to talk about it as one of the films that I should probably give a second chance to, and as a film that like I went into Coco with the opposite, basically, where I had heard it was, you know, Pixar is back on form, it's like one of their greats, and I very much kind of like was like, okay, here we go. Like was really buzzing for Coco and didn't love it. Like I again had like did not hate the movie in any way. Like I had a good time with it, but I think just like overall, I think because I expected so much from it, I found myself like actually basically spoiled it for myself. I kind of guessed a lot of what was going to happen before it happened, and was kind of like waiting for these like big beats, and I think as a result it just didn't impact me the way it should have. Also, just while I'm talking about it as well, one thing that came to mind is, so I went to see it when I just got to Manchester. I just moved there, and I think it's the first thing I went to see in the cinemas, and we went in, it was the Odeon we went to see it in. And we went in and we asked, obviously, I went up to the guy, and I think I've talked to you before about like you know, the struggles with like people there understanding like a Scottish accent, and this is such a weird one, where I remember like asking you, I was like, you get 2 tickets to Coco, and the guy was like, yeah, gave us the tickets, and we didn't even like look at them. We just went up to like whatever, like they told us like what screen it was, so we went like straight up and gave them the tickets, and then we, like they like directed us and we sat down. And then the movie started and it was Star Wars The Last Jedi. And I was like,
what?
I was so baffled, because I was just like, I don't understand how you could possibly mishear Coco, which is like a one syllable word.
A 4-letter word.
Yeah, one syllable as Star Wars The Last Jedi. And that was, we had to wait an extra hour to see it. We had to like leave because the next showing Coco wasn't for another hour, so we just had to kick about for an hour, and it was so bizarre. But yeah, sorry for
Did you have to go back to
the
guy and be like, oh, by
Yeah,
the
no,
way,
we literally
you
did. We were
gave
like,
me
yeah,
the wrong ticket.
we asked for tickets for Coco, and he was like, oh, sorry, I didn't realise. It's just, I didn't challenge him on it, but
Wow.
it's like, I don't understand how he made that mistake.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Sorry, as you were
No,
saying.
I remember. It's alright. I remember when I was watching it. It was funny because you could see. Obviously, where you sit on the plane, you can see other people's screens, so you can see what they're watching. But you could tell when people were watching Coco because they'd be laughing and joking and having a great time, and they would get to a certain point, and then they would be crying. And
Oh.
honestly, you could see them like dotted all around the plane, and you would see there was a girl. I was sitting here, and there was a girl kind of sitting here, and I could see that she was watching it, and she was having a good time. And I was like, "Girl, just wait." I was like, "I know what's coming."
The storm that lies ahead. That's wonderful. Very good answer. I again, with like most of my answers here, really struggled with this one where it's like I know there's loads of movies, especially when I'm younger,
Yeah.
that I would have had like really strong emotional reactions to, and just couldn't like pull any from the top of my head initially. More started kind of coming to me, and funnily enough, the thing that unlocked it was thinking down like the sort of animated Pixar route. The one I went for in the end, just probably because it's like one of the more recent films that I've like I've like ended up crying to, was Inside Out, which obviously you just mentioned before. And I remember I think it really like caught me by surprise in the cinema. But then I think weirdly, I think I remember rewatching it when it came out on like DVD, and I think I actually I cried at it more the second time, which was really really strange. Granted, like I had a lot going on in my life at the time, but at the same time, it was I remember thinking going into it like, oh yeah, like it's. I remember crying at this in the cinema, like one specific bit, and I think that like bit passed, and I was like, I'm safe now. And the movie got me again, and I was like, what? I knew it was gonna happen. So
that's so funny. Inside Out's such a good choice because we were watching it once in my house, me and my best pal, and everyone was just watching it. It was just in the middle of the day. We'd already seen it, but Fiona hadn't seen it. And she was in floods of tears. And my mum turned around at one point and was like, "Are you all right?" And she was like, like just unashamedly, she just let go. And she was feeling
quite right. It's an emotional movie.
It is emotional. It's a very good choice. I like that we both picked Pixar. I think they're so good at like their character work that you can't help but cry.
Yeah, and I think they did a really good job with it being animation and with them having packing like loads of jokes and stuff into their movies. I think when they want to like take the gloves off, you really do feel the punches.
Yeah.
So to finish up, the last question: what is your favorite movie memory?
I think this one was really hard, but I think my absolute favorite film of all time is Titanic, and I think I was super young the first time I watched it, and I've honestly couldn't even tell you how many times I've watched it. I just love it. I just think it's amazing. So I feel like I was like super lucky because it's my favorite movie, and then they re-released it. So when I was old enough, I got the chance. Like, luckily, it came about when that it must have been 2012, so I must have been like, what, 17, 18? So luckily it came out when I was old enough to go and see it at the cinema, and I just think it was honestly like one of those moments where the stars are aligning, like, of yes, this is my favourite movie ever, and now I get to go and see it in the cinema. And I think I saw it like 3 or 4 times in the cinema. Titanic's a movie that does, like, it's very much made for the big screen. Like, it looks amazing. It's such, like, it's a pretty big scale. So it just looked amazing in the cinema, and obviously the sound and everything. So yeah, that was. I just always think it's funny that, like, what are the chances that your absolute favorite movie ever would get re-released?
Yeah.
To like a big theatrical release, because sometimes I like to go and see re-releases, but it tends to just be like, you need to go on this one specific day or you're gonna miss it.
Yeah, that's very true. They don't make it easy for you to catch them, do they? It's always like one really like niche day and one really niche time, and you find out like really close, and it's just it's
like
really
a Wednesday at like 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, exactly, and it's almost just like, what's the point? Because I agree. Where like there's a bunch of movies, we talked about this before, a bunch of movies of mine that I'd kill to go and see in the cinema that I never have, or like have done and would kill to see again. So yeah, no, very good answer.
Thank you.
Again, I've gone for the kind of classics here. I've got like just a mix of answers, like going to see the last Harry Potter at midnight with like my mum and my brother. I remember like was just like a really wonderful like feeling, and it really did feel like the sort of culmination of like, you know, childhood building up to this thing. So that was like a really cool moment. I remember going to see Pirates of the Caribbean 3 and it just blowing my mind. Being so good. I do remember genuinely, because I was so excited for that movie. And it was the first Pirates of the Caribbean that I saw in a cinema as well, which probably like lends quite a lot to it.
Oh, yeah?
I wasn't, I missed the first two, and caught them on DVD basically and watched them over and over again. But yeah, I remember like having so much hype going into Pirates of the Caribbean 3, and genuinely by the end of it thinking that was better than I even imagined it would have been. And then obviously like
Love it.
the impacts lasted to this day. And then obviously the another obvious one is like I remember being taken to see the first Lord of the Rings as a kid, and I remember that just like being again like so sort of like transformative, and I think the biggest impact that had, or one of the biggest impacts that had, was I remember like, because obviously the movie doesn't finish the story. I remember genuinely like being so surprised by that just like it doesn't wrap things up at all. And I remember like actually like finding out that I'd have to wait for like the story to kind of be continued, and just thinking, especially as a kid, I was like, but I want to know now.
Yeah.
And that just being like, because again, people always talk about watching movies that have cliffhangers and stuff, but that's like one that always kind of like stands out to me. But yeah, those are kind of mine. And I guess that's us.
No,
that is
very good choices. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And likewise, that is all 30 questions, which took a lot longer to get through than I expected. So thank you for your patience. And yeah, as ever, thank you very much to those who watched. In case you might have forgotten, please look up the trailer for the video game of Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, because honestly,
I've got it in my notes.
it needs
No
to be
joke.
seen
There it
to
is.
be believed. But yes, yeah, as ever, thank you very much to those who watched, or who might have skimmed or whatever. And as ever, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. So until then, farewell.
See ya.